Shalom. First, I want to give all praises to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Peace and blessings to the sons of Yakim pushing this truth out. Shalom, keep pushing. But hey, we're going to get into this article again. It says AT&T employee training program says white people, you are the problem. So YouTube can't say that this is hate speech. Here's AT&T saying it. They can't single me out and saying, hey, I'm spewing this kind of hate speech when, hey, here it is, a multi-billion-dollar corporation. They saying the same stuff here. So, and guess who's the head of this so-called, who's the head of this multi-billion-dollar operation, the CEO? He's a so-called white man. And he's saying the same thing. It says AT&T Corporation is putting its employees through an racial re-education program that teaches that American racism is a uniquely white trait and tells white people they are the problem, according to a new report. According to internal documents obtained by City Journal's Christopher Rufo, the company implemented an initiative called the Listen Understand Act last year, which is based on the core principles of critical race theory, including intersectionality, systematic racism, white privilege, and white fragility. The program peddles left-wing causes, including reparations, defunding the police, and transgender activism, according to Rufo. CEO John Stankey has claimed that private corporations, including his own, have an obligation to engage on the issue of racial injustice and to advocate for system reforms in police departments across the country. A senior employee reportedly told that Rufo that managers at the company now face annual assessments on diversity issues and are forced to participate in discussion groups, book clubs, mentorship programs, and race re-education exercises. White employees who are willing to admit to being complicit in white privilege and systematic racism can be penalized in their performance reviews. Additionally, those who refuse to sign a loyalty pledge to keep pushing for change and to set intentions, such as reading more about systematic racism and challenging others' language that is hateful, are considered racist, the employee told Rufo. The program encourages employees to read an article entitled White America. If you want to know who's responsible for racism, look in the mirror. The article written by Dalen Gatton says white people, you are the problem. Regardless of how much you say you detest racism, you are the sole reason it has flourished for centuries. It adds that American racism is a uniquely white trait and that black people cannot be racist. The training encourages employees to undertake a 21-day racial equity habit challenge that calls on employees to do one action per day for 21 days to further their understanding of power, privilege, supremacy, oppression, and equity. It includes lessons on whiteness that teach that white supremacy is baked into our country's foundation and that whiteness is one of the biggest and most long-running scams ever perpetrated. The challenge adds that the weaponization of whiteness creates a constant barrage of harm for minorities. The challenge also recommends that employees review articles and videos that advocate for a number of progressive causes and asks employees to follow, quote, repost, and retweet organizations such as Transgender Training Institute and the National Center for Transgender Equality. In a statement to National Review, and AT&T spokesperson called Rufo's report misleading and said it is filled with misinformation and inaccuracies, including the ridiculous claim that we require employees to participate in race re-education exercises. This is blatantly untrue, the statement said. We simplify employees with resources so they can use on voluntary basis to facilitate conversations that are important to them, our customers, and the communities we serve. Whether an employee uses these resources or not is up to them and does not affect their annual performance rating. We have a loud and proud history of valuing diversity, equality, and inclusion, and will continue to do so. That's just the tide of the way. Everybody's against the so-called white man now. Everyone is turned against him, even the so-called white man. He's, it's like the scriptures say, if a house be divided, how can it stand? And this so-called white man's house is divided when you got so-called white people saying white people are the problem. And then you have these so-called white women jumping ship, getting with the so-called Negro, Latino, and Native American especially the so-called Negro and so-called Latinos. White women can't control themselves when they around, Jake, man. So this so-called white man, he's going down. And, white people have been the problem. You're the reason why there's so much hatred in the earth, killing, diseases, swords from war and famine. You at the helm of the ship. It's wickedness in the earth. Everybody's greedy. Everybody's, self-centered, vain, empty. Everybody's worrying about material things. And who's at the helm? The so-called white man. It all falls back on you, Esau Edom. But hey, that's the sign of the times that his kingdom is imploding before his eyes. The sand, he can't hold the sand in his hand no more. But we're gonna get some precepts here. We're gonna get Hebrews 12 and 16. And it says, lest there be any fornicator or profane person or as Esau, who for one morsel of meat sold his birthright. So yeah, the so-called white man, he's a fornicator and he's profane. He's outside the temple. As Esau. He's a fornicator. He's always, laying down with and worshiping all these other powers and things like that. These graven images. He loves worshiping Satan. He's into that. He's a spiritual fornicator, man. He's laid down with anything, spiritually. Egyptology, all that kind of mess. He's into that. But he's definitely outside the temple. And for one morsel of meat, he sold his birthright. So he's, that's not really the scripture I was looking at. I was really looking at the scripture for, Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated, which is Romans. Let's go to the book of Romans 9 and 13. And it says, as is written, Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated. So yeah, the Most High, he has a problem with Esau, the so-called white man. The one you call God, he has a problem with him. And he's taking him down as we speak. The economy is imploding. And yeah, but he's still a fornicator, and outside the temple, he's profane. So all this madness that's going on in the world is because of him. The oceans, the wind, the soil, the people, everyone's sick, disease, is all because of him, man. And he's too proud to admit that he's screwing up, or he's screwed up, and he needs help to fix it, and he refused to do it. So what he do? He said, he's gonna go to Mars, he's gonna go to space, and try to go ruin that. Not on top of all the space junk he got out there already in the atmosphere. And then we're going to get another precept real quick here. We're going to go to 2nd Esdras 6 and 7. And it says, Then answered I and said, what shall be the parting asunder of the times, or when shall be the end of the first and the beginning of that followeth? And he said unto him, from Abraham to Isaac, and when Jacob and Esau were born of him, Jacob's hand held first the heel of Esau, for Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth. So yeah, Esau is the so-called white man. He came out first, And the so-called Negro, Latinos, and Native Americans, we come out of Jacob. Jacob, who's the patriarch, the 12 tribes of Israel. We his children, we here now, and we the one hanging on the heel of Esau, his kids, the Edomites. And we about to get the kingdom next. Esau, the so-called white man, he's ruling right now. He's in power, but he's getting ready to get taken down. And as you see, his power is in dire straits. So hey, we at that time, we seeing the transition where everybody wants to be like the so-called Negroes, you know, you know, everything's turning to a more color type of world on a simple level. Even the women of all nations, whether they Chinese, Japanese, so-called Korean, so-called Chinese, so-called white, so-called, Hawaiian, they all want the so-called black man or so-called Latino man or so-called Native American. The tides have changed. Look at old Adele. Soon as she got divorced from that so-called white man, she went and got her a so-called black man. So, hey, these are the times of the change, man. The tides turn, and you know, and like I'm saying, the so-called white man, he's against himself now, so he's all in disarray, and he's about to fall at any moment now. But to the Sons of Yakim, keep pushing, and to the 12 tribes of Israel, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, y'all need to wake up. And and it's not a color thing, there are Israelite foreigners. You might look like the other nations, but your spirit, your bloodline goes back to the Israelites. Whatever the case may be, you need to wake up and start digging into it and figure out what's going on ASAP, because we almost out of here. Shalom.